Welcome back to ThinkTech. I'm Jay Fidell. Today we're going to catch up with Kakaako, our series Catching Up on Kakaako. What should we build in Kakaako Makai? Our 40-story luxury condos, the answer? Oh, and we're going to pose that question to Martin Despang, who is an architect par excellence, the universal international visionary architect right here among us, our regular host on Humane Architecture. Welcome to the show, Martin. Nice to see you. Let's talk about catching up on Kakaako Makai. What should we build in Kakaako? And our 40-story luxury condos, the answer.
All right, Jay, thanks for having me. And let's do it, as you pointed out, the humane architecture way. And let's be high on visuals, visionary. And we got the first slide up here. And I just walk you and the audience through, and you chip in wherever you think, hopefully at a lot of situations. So you just told me before the show this is highly controversial. There's going to be a major decision going to be made this week here. And so far, you had been doing a great series with really cool people from community leaders and activists, and not to forget Scott Wilson, Chip Fletcher, and DeSoto Brown. And you were all in agreement one should not build, at least not the proposed way, of luxury condo towers. And no surprise, I could agree, and that is it, right? And thanks for the show, and move on, right? But we take it a little bit more challenging and less easy here this time, if you don't mind, Jay. So let's say we would build, and I was digging out this show quote here from a while ago, and at the very bottom, you can listen to this gentleman here who we once had on a review at the school. This is Neil Abercrombie. He was well prepared. He came with a book by Louis Mumford, Wither Honolulu, that he did his PhD on, as you almost, with Michael Kimmelman, Jay, right?
Oh, wow,
as you were
really
sharing.
Touching all the bases here. Louis Mumford, my God. And Michael Kimmelman, my favorite. I'm sure, the people should know about both of them.
See, and we know from your show with DeSoto where you were reminding us of that. So controversially, at the very bottom, there's a link to Hawaii Public Radio where Neil says Kakaako Makai needs to be developed. So now, if that would be the case, let's join him and let's see how one could, because otherwise there's only black and white, and maybe we can find some mediating green middle ground. But before we do that, we have to show the gray, and that's the next slide. That's us these rainy days on Ala Moana Boulevard. And then there's Kakaako Makai, which is to the right of that, where the ocean is. And there is Kakaako Mauka, which is to the left. And these are these mountains of Howard Hughes in that case. And show quote at the top right, just to let you guys know, we're looking at each and every one of them at some point. This was many years ago. It says 3 years ago, where we're looking at the one that's the most recent going up there. And that is Victoria Place by Howard Hughes. And DeSoto, being from here, as Victoria was, allowed himself to say she would probably turn around in her grave if she sees her name being abused for that reason. Okay, next slide. Next slide is taking even another hat on, besides the many that you already gave me. No pressure at the beginning in your introduction, Jay. Thank you. This is the German one. So from the other end of the world, and it's also using the angle of one of your other shows with our emerging non-traditional talent, George Kaysen at the top right, your movie shows, and a movie that you probably won't feature because it's already popular enough, and that is Avatar 2. You see our exotic escapism expert, Susanna, and myself, some few weeks ago back in Germany watching it. And you see next to it our emerging generation here watching it. And what we see down there is what we all thought, wow, this is Kakaako Mauka. It's called Bridgehead City. And it's the epitome of the evil. They have robots that build these buildings as fast as you can. And ever since I saw that, when I drive by, which by the way, I shouldn't, reminding us of the previous slide, which I'm doing with our publicly investigating mobile, which is at least old. And that's one of the things, never tear anything down or throw away. Use it, use it, use it. And it's a convertible. So, but when it rains, I have the top on. And then there's these biggie bicycles, if you remember the last slide, and that traces back to you, Jay, having been a bicycling pioneer together with Ben, who was at McCully Bike Repair Shop. So we go again. They're different than these rip-off biggies. They have a good intention, but they go the wrong way, because we should all bicycle with our old bicycles on Ala Moana Boulevard in the future, right? So next slide. This is what Kakaako Makai is supposed to be according to OHA and these illustrations. And this is a nice eye candy watercolor image. But when we look closer, next slide, and we zoom in at the top of it, we see it's the same old hermetic, invasive. There's a rainbow reflection on the windows. It's not quite a rainbow. Some colors are missing. But it just reminds us of when the rainbows are mirrored in the glass, and the glass is suffocating us and microwave grilling us, which is wrong. Next slide. Even though the architectural profession tries to basically sell it to us as having to do with our culture, this is the first we remember Howard Hughes Tower, the Waiea, that's supposed to allude to water. And I heard the architect once saying it was inspired by his culture's communal fishing hukilau, which again, some other locals say they would turn around in their grave if their tradition would have been abused for such a microwave here. Our assistant fire chief for fire prevention, Socrates Paratakos, also gets grossed out by things like that because it's against the things that he represents, even building codes. They're supposed to, help us. So next slide. If we do a little detective work, and that's what we do on humane architecture, we find out that the same architect who designed the previous building is also involved in what's proposed for Kakaako Makai by OHA. And go to the next slide and zoom in into the previous one. He brings up this Polynesian pop thing here, which reminds us of the international marketplace. And the architect was instrumental in that one as well, in giving this pretty corporate American mall the Hawaiian blessing with the courtyards and whatever Maukatu Makai Ahapua. And in fact, what he tore down was by the great modern mid-century master Pete Wimberley. These Tiki Hali interpretations were actually doing that versus the replacement of it. It goes on like that. Next slide, because that same firm kindly hosted us for some Docomomo board meetings. They're also involved in the redevelopment of the Blaisdell that we were highly critical of, because one could have kept the exhibit hall and just bring it back to what it was. This is a show quote at the left in the middle, in the center there. That was the only time when I went out of my comfort zone and did a counter proposal that we see at the top left, and just keeping everything, building a backbone building that would have had an LED screen and that you could have packed all the new functions they certainly need. And but it would display like a piece of velvet cloth, the jewels that you have from mid-century in front of that. And who told us about that? Next slide is Master Richard Lowe, who was planner with Victoria Ward. And she liked him and he liked her for good reasons. And this goes back, Jay, when we initially started to do the show. You got to me and you said, Martin, we don't want to talk about architecture. We want to talk about planning. And I was snarking back and saying, Jay, I feel like there is no one thing without the other. There is no architecture without planning, and there should be no planning without architecture, because architecture is the genetic code that drives planning, as it shows here. And on the next slide, because that's one of the masters that was invited to design towers, but easy breezy inclusive towers. And that was the great Steve Au, who was also the architect of the Ward Warehouse and Ward Plaza, that Howard Hughes tore down way too early as to replace them with their hermetic high-rises. And next slide, there's Richard Lowe still running and swinging strong in his 90s, some few years ago, and demonstrating, going into that direction, what could be the alternative. And that gets us back to your movie show, Jay, and basically your colleague. Next slide, George Kaysen. Because I was actually told, Martin, with your weird trips you're on, you might want to reach out to James Cameron. That was some years ago, and I always didn't quite know what to think about it. But once I saw Avatar 2, I'm like, oh my God, now I know what that person was trying to tell us. And Jay, you also know what that's about, because next slide, we forced you to be a reviewer on one of the single building iterations of that was called Primitiva 2. And after that one, you asked the question, am I still allowed to wear clothes in that building? And George said, very cleverly as he is, why you made him a showmaster after that. Yes, very much, because it's an inclusive building. No one is forced to do, like in the conventional ones, to do something, but everyone can do what he wants. And next slide, that then basically would then look up like that. This is Kakaako Makai, as it would be imagined when these Primitiva 3 kind of starts to sprout out, while at the same time, even more provocatively, the existing towers get taken back and over by nature. And the young talent, not as non-traditional in many ways, because George was also proposing to inspire us with his raw vegan diet that made him look so young with uncolored hair that he has, and some of us don't have anymore, Jay, right? And the younger, even younger people, next slide, he's an emerging talent. They wear a different hairstyle. And this is Kendall Leonard, who is the team member who was not just envisioning, but also illustrating what we saw on the last slide. And next slide, I'm currently have the privilege to keep working with him, and he gets inspired with because of all the best from all ends of the world, this sketch by the legendary Fry Otto, that our guest Larry Madeline told us that he was onto something that we thought he might have wanted to do for us in Hawaii, because only in Hawaii you could do that because of our privileged climatic conditions. Next slide. There are even traces of that, as he told us, in Hawaii, because one of his disciples, collaborators, was retiring in Hawaii after he was pretty successful in applying that on a small scale as a childhood playground furniture that you can climb on. And that's a tensegrity system using not bulky, massive, gravity-based stuff that, as we just found out in Turkey, the tragic way with over 50,000 casualties, is very problematic in areas that are impacted by potentially, we have some seismic over there too, right on the Big Island, and we are having tsunamis and potentially hurricanes and stuff like that. So talking emerging generations, next slide, you know one other gentleman here that you got together with recently at the holiday party. And Samuel went to Kalaheo. That's the same school that Kendall went to. And next slide. They both were building the first Department of Education approved hale, as here the picture taken by Kendall. And next slide. It was a great experience and is a great experience. There's another talent of my previous studio here. That's Harding. Harding is a proud member of the Navajo population on the mainland, indigenous Native Americans. And he was, experiencing, like we all, what it meant to actually build something from scratch with your hands, without all this invasive stuff of concrete pumping, like Bridgehead City. And rightly so, while, most of the material is still from here. They actually used mangrove as wood, which was new to me. And the thatching is from palm trees. The latching is vinyl petroleum-based. That's a little questionable, but it got us to something as a neo-indigenous material, potentially. And now you got to have all these sort of progressive Native Hawaiians with you, and the reactionary we still have to convince, who say we can't touch Pele, literally and figuratively. You got to go the angle of that she is helping us and producing the building material for us on a daily basis. And that material is that you take the very own basalt lava that our islands are made of, You heat it up again with all the renewable energy sources we potentially have. In that process, you extract fibers from it and you make it into cables and cords. And that way you reconnect to the culture of latching, because the people, basically guiding us with a holly, who run a fish pond in Kaneohe, in Kaneohe, Kalaheo and Kaneohe. I put the two together in one word. So you get it. They said without the latching, we wouldn't have been going anywhere. We wouldn't have been fishing, canoeing, nothing, no fisher nets. So really the latching is ingrained in our culture. So this is bringing it back to our culture, but in a different way, because that hollies were then and now is now, and they don't really help us with the big problems that we have, as housing is one of the biggest. For many people down low in the food chain, Native Hawaiians, unfortunately, being a big portion and part of it. Next slide. We use one of these Fry Otto sketches as to say, what if? Maybe that could get us to something, because these are not buildings. These are scapes as landscapes, and they're Fryscapes. His mother gave him the name because he wanted him to be free. A short time after, we Germans, as your culture, unfortunately, Jay, found out the hardest and most brutal way, have been the opposite, but free to anyone. And so she wanted him to grow and above and beyond. She was very successful with that. And so next slide, which is the second to last. What if we suggest that as to build a Fryscape on the side of Kakaako Makai? And there's other mountains up there, are what we have on Mauna Kea these days as well, with climate change blessing us with blizzards and several foot of snow. I'm used to this where I'm from, or where I am right now, where our exotic escapism experts Susanna is. These are the Munich Mountains there. And why do I show this? Because if I would have stayed a little longer, I would have brought something that technology transfer-wise, there's a company, they're called Siltex. And they manufacture, guess what, basalt cables and cords. And while we could import it from there, and that would be like Larry Medlin did it with the 1967 pavilion at the German pavilion at the World Expo, where they brought this in few shipping containers, all rolled up on a wooden barrel, and then made these, enclosures out of it. So they made the most with the leaves, which is Hawaiian tradition with the hollies. We could import it, but even better, we could use their technology transfer and have them train us in making that our very own neo-indigenous building material by ourselves. And final slide, next one. This is in Kendall again, designing this not from outside in, how it looks as pretty backdrop in architecture, but from inside out, because he wants to reconnect it seriously, and not just figuratively, but literally, to the tradition of fishing, because he's a homegrown boy. And he says, why don't we equip buildings, not just new ones like these, but basically retrofit buildings, like, for example, the Ke Kilohana, which is Howard Hughes' desperate attempt to do affordable housing, which led to the HOA fees go through the sky, and some people who could just barely afford it need to move out again. To retrofit these buildings with things like that, which are horizontal linear fish ponds with an innovative material of ETFE, which is a translucent foil that you have the fish swim in, and they swim, and you can fish them right in front of you on your lanai, which he's also adding. So this is designed not from outside in as an image of in Beaux-Arts 20th century, same old, but this is totally trying to rejuvenate culture, Hawaii culture from within. I leave it with that and open this up for the discussion, Jay.
Wow, what a fire hydrant. Martin, I think I love you. You are so full of thoughts and ideas. And my only question on that level is how do you go 20 minutes like that without breathing?
Through 283 training sessions, thanks to you and humane architecture, because that's the show we will be in 2 days on Wednesday, as always.
Okay,
Wednesday.
I'll be looking forward to that. So, okay, a couple of questions here. This does not include concrete or 40-story luxury condos. It includes instead the fry forest, if I could call it that. And so what is that like though in terms of the user experience? So I say to myself, as I have many times, I would like to spend a little time in Kakaako Makai. What kind of experience do I have there? What do I do there? How do I enjoy the recreational possibilities?
It's a full-blown tropical exotic experience, Jay, first and foremost. And we got to rethink our paradigm because we've been invaded by invasive Western practices of hermeticization, if that's a word at all, right? And I'm broadcasting from the two-star Grand Hotel in Waikiki, the Waikiki Grand, which was one of the first ones we did a show about because I ended up in one of the most inclusive that it still is up to these days because you got the whole variety of bunch of people living here. We have Tina and John, who used to be multimillionaire real estate people from California. Once they couldn't hear each other in one of their big mansions over there, they pulled the plug, they moved here. They live in the same 230 square feet as we all do, as does Wanda, whom they very greatly and warm-heartedly take care of, who lives across the hallway here, who's from former Yugoslavia and lives on a shockingly low social security paycheck that she had once shown to me. That's just two examples of the variety of people we have in here, right? The lobby is open. You can walk up to any kind of unit on the door and knock. Everything is easy breezy. Single-loaded corridors, you name it, you have it all. So whenever people are questioning the visions and the trips I'm on, I'm saying, hey, I'm living it on a daily basis. But also you see how even that very innovative in 1962 it's getting up in age and it's having sort of, it shows incontinence because up there yesterday morning on my way, my very first trip to the toilet, it was dripping on me, and it is failing and leaking, basically plumbing up there, right? So what we're trying to do is encourage everyone to reinvent themselves back to the roots of Hawaii was, but then, as you can tell, using the modern marvels of technology as well at the same time. So they put the two together. So what does that mean as experience, Jay? It means that only here in Hawaii, because where I come from, especially now, because we've been putting all the cards on Putin, unfortunately, and now more than ever, we're kind of in deep problem and trouble, right? How do we stay warm in the winter, without Putin's oil? And the whole energy transitioning gets even more challenging. Here, it's paradise in many ways, also in terms of human thermal comfort. So what we're proposing is to cultivate a nomadic lifestyle where we can roam through these scapes in the way we would like to. And some could actually inhabit these temporarily, but not as a permanent territorialization, but as a temporary territorialization. Because going back to Primitiva 3, what's the place we have the most fun at in the week? On the beach, right? The weekend on the beach. And is the floor level? No, it's not. It's undulated. Do I occupy always the same spot? No, because maybe someone is faster next week, right? Is that a problem? No, it is actually fun. So that's what we try to incorporate into that scape and experience and experiment a rejuvenation of an all tropical exotic experience and lifestyle, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, you alluded to who might be there, but I'd like you to articulate who is this for? Who would come? Who would be there? What is the the attraction to various groups and individuals in Honolulu that this has?
That's why I made the reference to my very own experience for 10 years in the all-inclusive, easy-breezy Waikiki Grand, because it's for everyone who wants. And of course, this is the iffy point, who behaves. An example, we have what I heard, a $60,000 equivalent of a Steinway piano in the open lobby that there is no security guard, nothing. This is a condo hotel. So we also have our sweet front desk people, but they can't do everything at the same time, watch cameras and greet guests and do all this stuff. So if someone is an urban nomad, how I like to call the cultivation of homelessness, and they apply and they qualify, they get the key and they play the piano. People like that are welcomed, and that's the experience that a homeless person is part of the community and plays wonderful music to us, because I know this from a daily basis, Jay. From here.
In terms of community, I think one of the elements of public spaces, and I consider this, I think you do too, as a public space.
Yeah.
You should need the nutrition of a public space, to make a quality of life in a city like Honolulu. So clearly, how does this build community? I'm sort of advancing in my question about, the individual experience. How does this build a communal experience? What community is created? How does this project create community?
By the nature of attraction, Jay. When I accidentally stumbled into your show almost with DeSoto last week, I had this image here up, my background picture. And what did you say immediately? What was your response? You remember? I help you out. You say, that's a jungle. That's what you said immediately. And you're right on, right? So how does a jungle attract people, right? That's where people come together. They want to be in the jungle. They want to see Manoa Falls, right behind my employer in Manoa, right? It attracts people by, this is the most ultimate natural experience that attracts us and hopefully makes us people react and behave decently in it, because we're so stunned by how perfect nature is. So we want to be part of it, and we also want to be just like that, and that's the way basically is. If we create environments that are as close to nature as nature is, but nature is nature and architecture is architecture, so it's not that easy, I think we have the best chance to be what you are asking for, become.
So this right now, this land is held by OHA. OHA has this project that it would like to develop, and that's the issue before the legislature. And my last question to you, Martin, is how does this serve, Native Hawaiians, indigenous people? How does it serve the connection, really important, the connection between Native Hawaiians, the Native Hawaiian history and culture, and, the whole Native Hawaiian experience, and connect it with other people who might join and be part of that same community? What's the connection?
The Keli'i Akina way, I have to say, who's one of your longest standing hosts. And when he welcomed me, he basically quickly said, hey, Martin, I don't care where you come from, but I care for how you behave. And if you behave in a way that it supports my culture, you're one of us immediately. I don't care what your blood is or whatever, where you come from, but I care for where you're going. And when you're going with me in the right direction, you're one of me. And I think ever since, that gives me hope for how it should serve, the evolution of Hawaiian culture in this very, very warm, welcoming way of how Keli'i has done it and continues to do it.
Wow, what a beautiful picture. So, what is the future of a project like this? In other words, let's assume for a moment there is no 40-story luxury condo in this location, and there's no, poured concrete all around you. Let's assume it's something creative and humane, at this location. How long does it last? What is the depreciable useful life, if you will, of a project like this? How does it integrate with the future of the city, and how long does it stand?
And let's again be very clear, Jay. Luxury condo, no way. Because luxury is against Hawaiian culture. I mean, as far as I know, from my only a decade having been here, Hawaiian culture was always inclusive and had not let anyone not be part of it. And so condo is a Western construct. of territorialization. So none of the two. This here is trying to, yes, Chip Flesher was telling you this is floodland, and everyone else as well. This is floodland, right? It's vulnerable to be wiped out by the next tsunami, which DeSoto was saying. All that one is true. This one here is taking all that into consideration. It is open. It is easy breezy. So if a storm comes, the storm plows through, and it won't impact anything because there is nothing to hit. There's no glass that vicious circle-wise has to get bigger and bigger and bigger because the storm gets stronger and stronger and stronger. So I need to put up more heat to melt sand, what glass is, right? This is a vicious circle. We can't win that. And we have to embrace. This is like mangroves. They grow in the water. This is embracing the ocean. This is growing out of the water. And it is basically like this is a modern version of the holly. However, the holly, literally we can't build anymore, but this one we can build. Socrates Pratakos is not excited about the traditional holly because it's all combustible material, right? But this basalt core is non-combustible. He's super excited about. Steel cables, no, they fail. But this stuff, wow, this is cool. So it's taking pretty much, it drew inspiration, all the sort of Debbie Downer points that you guys went through in all your shows. We took to our heart and basically addressed. But don't get it wrong. We're not saying this is the solution. Because of the mentioned cultural background of having heard first and foremost your culture so badly, when I hear die Endlösung, that was one of the worst things that there has been in history, because that's what Hitler said. I'm very sensitive to when someone says, where is the solution? Where is the Endlösung? I don't think there is. So this shouldn't be mistaken as a counter proposal as it is, but it is food for thought that's very serious and passionate about to reconsider our thinkings about, again, about space and place, as you always allude to your big hero, Kim Il-man, rightly so. And how do we do this rooted in the traditions of our place here, projecting that into the future? That it is.
Lovely, Martin. Lovely. It's a concept. It's a state of mind. It's an out-of-the-box way of thinking. And we certainly appreciate your discussion of it, your suggestion of it, and all your millions of thoughts flying in all directions about it. Thank you so much, Martin.
Thank you. One final thing. It's not mine. The message of this is what my dear friend and colleague and also frequent guest on our shows, Bundit Kanistakon, says. Ask the students. Have you asked the students? So this is about not us old farts speaking about myself, but asking the future generation who will live in that in the future. These are the ones to ask, and they have worked on this. That's their process. That's their thinking. I'm just there to help here and there. So just wanted to add that.
I want to join your class. Martin Despang, architect and teacher and thinker and a creative person who spreads his creativity to generations in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.